Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Josie's Point of View, where we focus on human interest stories from the Carolinas and beyond. Today's Sunday and it's June the 29th, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you find the information here to be informative. And if you're a return viewer, by all means, thank you for coming back. You know, I always say the tide changes so frequently here on these YouTube streets, so you always have to acknowledge where your support comes from. And I want you to know I sincerely thank you for your support. So feel free to like and to share this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And our story today comes from Fort Bragg here in North Carolina. Take a look at the headline. And it reads, 3 Fort Bragg soldiers recently sentenced for child sex crimes. I'll provide you with a summary here, and as always, I'll identify some of my sources for you in the description box. Well, this is a continuation of the video that we produced earlier in the month where we focused on recent convictions for child sex crimes, and those convictions were in the civilian sector, but don't think we forgot about the military. Let's take a look and see what's been going on over at Fort Bragg. And for the first case, we want to look at a soldier who was recently sentenced to 50 years in prison for child sex crimes. And this was based on a military court-martial that took place just recently, 16 to 18 June, and it was published in the media on June the 24th, 2025. And we're talking about Army Specialist Javon Stewart, a 26-year-old petroleum specialist assigned to the 108 Air Defense Artillery Brigade, the 18th Airborne Division on Fort Bragg. He recently pled guilty to over 24 sex crimes against children, and at that court-martial, he received his punishment. And here's a summary right here. It says an Army specialist who authorities say likely preyed on hundreds of children across the United States has been sentenced to 50 years in prison for sexual assault, child pornography, and other crimes involving minors. Now, we're not exactly sure how long these activities had been taking place, but what really brought this to the surface was when a parent in another state noticed something very disturbing on a young child's personal device, and they contacted the authorities. And a trace of the IP address led them all the way to Fort Bragg here in North Carolina and to the soldier we're discussing today. So before we talk about his punishment, let's briefly address what Stewart did to minor children. According to reports, his crimes against children took place between 2021 and 2024. That's what he's being charged with. But they believe his activities could have started many years before that. They believe that even though they're focusing on 30 known victims, investigators believe the actual count could be in the hundreds, way over 100. And it's very possible that as time go by, more and more victims are going to emerge. But the key is all of these children were minors, some were as young as 7 years old. And in order to commit his crimes, this is how the paratrooper conducted himself. Stewart approached his victims online, pretending to be a teenager, and using graphic language, he convinced them to send him pornographic videos and images. But it was not just online activities. There were in-person contact as well. And in at least 2 of the known in-person encounters, there were 2 15-year-olds involved, and he had convinced them to meet up with him in person, and Stewart did sexually assault both of the young girls. He also participated in group that traded child pornography, seeking materials from others while also soliciting them from minor children themselves. And this behavior went on for several years. And so Specialist Stewart was scheduled to face a court-martial where he would have to answer to those charges. Numerous offenses, including sexual assault of a child and child pornography. And his date was 16 to 18 June, and this is out of the trial docket. And he elected, and his choice, he could have had a decision made by a group of officers on a panel or by the judge alone, and he elected to enter a guilty plea on reduced charges, and that the judge alone would make the decision as for his future. And here's a summary of those charges for which she pled guilty: two, specification of sexual assault of a child; six, specification of sexual abuse of a child involving indecent communication; six, specification of production of child pornography; three, specification of possession of child pornography; one, specification of receipt of child pornography; two, specification of viewing child pornography; one, specification of attempted production of child pornography; and seven, specifications of attempted sexual abuse of a child involved in indecent communication. And keep in mind, again, these are crimes that he was accused of from 2021 to 2024, and they may have gone on for many years before, but there was a host of charges, and this is what he pled guilty to. And let me tell you, I just wanted to be there as an advocate for children, to be able to sit in that courtroom as Specialist Stewart explained to that judge why he was guilty of those charges, because he couldn't just say guilty. He had to explain to the judge exactly what he did and respond to appropriate questions. But I had surgery, my doctor wouldn't let me out, so I had to wait and do the best thing, wait until someone else had published the findings. And as far as sentencing, the judge did have the ability to exercise some discretion. He had the ability to select for jail time anywhere from a minimum of 20 years to a maximum of 50 years in prison, and that judge selected the maximum. Specialist Stewart was sentenced to 50 years in prison for child sex crime. And additionally, he was reduced to the grade or the rank of E1. He has lost all pay and benefits, and if he's lucky enough to survive those 50 years, he'll have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. And just a few weeks earlier, we learned that another Fort Bragg soldier was sentenced to 15 years for sexually assaulted a child. And this was from a military court martial held on 22nd of May, 2025. Now, I wanted to find some background information on this case, so I did a search and I was able to locate an article from when he was arrested. And this was from the Daily Record. It's a newspaper coming out of Harnett County, which is close by. And the headline read, "Four arrested in alleged sex offense cases, one involved Fort Liberty soldier." And the date of this reporting was December the 1st, 2023. So that's when he was initially arrested. And that soldier was 26-year-old Army Specialist Skylar Griffin, a paratrooper assigned to the 189th Division, the 82nd Airborne Sustainment Brigade as a parachute rigger. And he was charged with raping an 11-year-old who was the younger sister of a family friend. Now, the activities took place off post in Sanford, North Carolina, in a subdivision called Linden Oaks, and that's just a few miles away from the Fort Bragg installation. And investigators say it happened over several months in 2023, and all of this was verified through forensic examination and detailed interviews with the child in question. Now, in order to commit the crimes, they say he used his status and influence on the victim's family to be a predator of the worst kind. Now, he faced a host of charges summarized here: statutory sex offense with a child, displaying materials considered harmful to a child, three counts of taking indecent liberties with a child. So not only did he violate the child, he's accused of showing her naked pictures of himself and also for child pornography. And these two people pictured here were also arrested and charged in relation to this case. Ivy Marie Benson and Matthew L. Smith were arrested and charged with making it possible for Griffin to be alone and behind closed doors with the 11-year-old. In fact, the report specifically said they allowed him to be behind closed doors and encouraged it, sleeping in the same bed with the 11-year-old victim. They encourage it, and these are family members. So sometimes family members are the worst possible kind. Now, in addition, yes, they were arrested and charged, but their bond was so low, it was simply unbelievable. I don't know the outcome of their case. I didn't go looking for it, but let's get back to Griffin. And of course, Specialist Griffin was scheduled to face a court martial to answer for his crimes. And this was not handled. The case was not handled in the civilian court. It was handled in the military by military court martial. And at the top here, you can see the list of offenses that he faced. And I went all of the articles, I looked them up. 120B has to do with child sexual assault. Article 82 had to do with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Article 134 has to do with child pornography. Article 92 has to do with failing to obey a direct order. And 112A has to do with possession and distribution of controlled substances. And it may not be relating to drugs. It may be relating to child pornography, which is, a controlled material. So those are the charges that he faced. His court-martial day was held on the 22nd of May, 2025, and as you can see, he did enter a plea of guilty to reduced charges, and he elected to have his sentence and his case and his sentence his punishment be administered by the judge alone. He elected to forego the panel, and that's a choice that he has. But this all took place on May the 22nd, 2025. And as I already mentioned, he entered a guilty plea, a negotiated plea to reduce sentence. He pled guilty to one specification of RAPE of a child, three specification of sexual abuse of a child, and one specification of receiving child pornography. And again, that was all during his court appearance on May the 22nd, 2025. And the judge sentenced him as follows: 15 years of confinement at Fort Leavenworth Penitentiary, reduction to private, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and benefits, and when he's released, if he's released, he will be required to register as a sex offender. And we're not done, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go over this final case. It's all about an Army soldier again from North Carolina. We only have one Army base in North Carolina, which is Fort Bragg. And this is a case that was prosecuted in the civilian courts out of Wilmington, North Carolina. And the headline read, "Former Army soldier sentenced to more than 24 years for producing child sexual abuse material." And as you can see right here, the date here was April the 23rd, 2025. And this case was prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of North Carolina. And this case all came to light based on a tip to investigators from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They alerted the authorities that someone had been uploading child pornography. And when the IP address was traced back, it showed back to a North Carolina soldier. And his name was Jason Charles Manuelito. And this is a warning for all parents. I want you to pay attention because the information below was taken from the Department of Justice report. I simply cut and pasted it because I wanted you to see exactly what they were saying. Let's read together. A military search and seizure authorization was executed for Manuelito's person and his bags. Digital devices were seized and analyzed, and investigators found numerous conversations between Manuelito and children and where he would encourage the child to send specific images of their genitals and engaging in sexual acts. Manuelito would oftentimes send explicit images of his genitals to the children. There were approximately 9 victims identified and interviewed, and many others were unidentified. Some of the victims were as young as 11 years old when Manuelito were enticing them to self-produce child sexual abuse materials and share it with him. In a recorded interview with law enforcement, Manuelito admitted he had been involved in online relationships with minors. During the course of these online relationships, both he and the victims would engage in sexual conversations and then exchange illicit images. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about your babies, children 11 years old, and many of them were never identified, could be much younger, simply deplorable. And based on a plea agreement, he was allowed to plead guilty to lesser charges, which was accepted by the court. And his sentence 24 years in prison, followed by 10 years of supervision. And you notice the headline says former soldier. That's because he's no longer part of the military. And so you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I presented you with three cases of three paratroopers who were recently sentenced to significant jail time for crimes against children. But they're not alone. There's more to come, so stay tuned. And that's all I have for you right now. Feel free to leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about this video. And by all means, feel free to like it and to share it. And if you haven't done so already, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel by clicking on that red subscribe button. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on the bell that looks just like this one, that's the notification bell. If you click on that notification bell, you'll be the first to know whenever a new video is uploaded. I thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.